Ring, ding, ding, ding. You go,
Good evening and welcome. I'm Hailey Coxon and this is Revved Up and Relived on the Spirit of Motorsport TV. Thank you so much once again for joining us. Remember, this is an interactive experience, so feel free to comment, share it with your friends, tag your friends in, get them joining in on the show. You can send any questions that you have for tonight's show to us and any of the guests that are joining us in the studio. So tonight we have the great Barry Wood and Roy Moore joining us and a couple of other guests as well as we honor the iconic Isle of Man TT Scoreboard that adorns the infamous start and finish straight and the Glencutchery Road, the Isle of Man TT course. It's been updating spectators and lap times for over 100 years and sadly now it will be no more. Currently it's being pulled down and it's going to be replaced with a new updated, more technology inclined version of it, which is breaking all of us Isle of Man TT fans' hearts. So tonight we had to honor it. We had to celebrate it. So we've got some great content to share with you and some fabulous stories from over the years. So we've got Brendan Byrne, the controller. He will be joining us. He's provided some great pictures of him working and controlling the scoreboard over the last few years. And also a super uber fan of the Spirit of Motorsport TV, Ian Anthony Huntley is joining us in the studio, who has been attending, I believe 73 TTs he's attended over the years, which is incredible. So he's sharing some of his stories of our great scoreboard too. So remember, share it with your friends, like it, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and do enjoy the conversation. Join in on the conversation, fire your questions our way. So without further ado, I'm going to invite the great Roy Moore and Barry Wood into the studio. Welcome back, guys.
Evening, campers. Good evening, everybody. Good to see Barry back after his absent without leave the last time we were here, but being to hell, I'm back again.
Welcome back, Barry. You were definitely missed. We had a great time, but you were still absolutely missed. So it's so nice to have you back with us.
Lucky. I was involved.
Well, it's good to have you back, and it's so important, isn't it, boys, to be honouring the scoreboard. Over 100 years of history, and it's just such not only an iconic part of our course and part of the TT, but it's an iconic scoreboard within the motorsport world, isn't it?
It's unique anyway. The scoreboards there now, they weren't always of that design. In the early days, it was a much more basic layout, which would have been just completed by committee, or marshals or authorities. They would have just done that, and it was just the basics, who were the top six at the time. 1922, when the start was just up above St Ninian's Crossroads, would have been the first time where we had a similar type of a arrangement to what we're familiar with the clocks and the Boy Scouts and things like that. If I could just chip in here, and I brought a little something along tonight, which will interest Brendan Byrne, I'm sure, and lots of others. If you can see this, it's a statue of Baden-Powell. Can you see that there?
Yeah, I can see it.
Right. Now, me grandfather, who was a scoutmaster for many, many years, he was awarded that for 21 years to Manx scouting between 1914 and 1935. He was given that in February 1935. So he would have been very much a part of the scoreboards from the very start. Now, going back to 2007, which was the centenary year, there was an exhibition in the Manx Museum that year, And we found a photograph of the start down where I just explained. And quite unbeknown to us that this existed, my mum and myself, it said, I think it was 2nd Douglas Scouts on scoreboard duty with their Scoutmaster, Mr. A.F. Bell, my granddad, TT 1922. Unfortunately, at the time, I never asked, could I buy the photograph of them? I will do that because it would be great to have. Plus, it means we can claim as a family over 100 years of involvement with the TT in the mountain course and scoreboards. So obviously, I'm quite passionate about the scoreboards. My uncle Pat, and my granddad's brother, he also served on the scoreboards over 30 years, despite having a leg blown off in the Second World War in Crete. He actually amputated the rest of his leg in Crete. Well, he served 30 years on the scoreboards with a wooden leg, which was a different story back in those days. So yes, we've got a lot of passion there, really. Lots of people have been saying, haven't they, Roy, in the last few days on our group about their own experiences on the scoreboards as Boy Scouts over the years. And there's been some lovely stories, and not one person hasn't enjoyed their times, have they?
They haven't. And from my point of view, I think you're kind of worried about repeating yourself, really, but we were born in Park Avenue, 1947, which has been mentioned again tonight. So Ian Anthony Huntley there is that's the amount of time. So 47. And it used to be in family discussions, I was too young to do it, but maybe say 6 or 7 years later, in the very early 50s, it was always a thing that you knew that the TT was about to be upon you, because normally we're going to see it now for the first time for a long time, a pavement running down the left-hand side or right-hand side as you come down the mountain course. But they used to store the boards away up in Greenfield Road, not too far away. And you could always get excited when you saw the boys taking the where the stanchions go in, getting the tops off them and cleaning them out after all the winter muck that had gone into them and all that. And you knew full well then it was the beginning of May, and that very, very shortly you'd see the boards coming down, getting assembled in a Meccano type order. The tradesmen of the time would have it all worked out, and they knew exactly what they were doing, where the stanchions went, how the boards were fitted together and everything. So that was my first early recollection of it. It would be either Jeff Cannell or Jack Cannell would be popping into Park Avenue and saying the scoreboards are going up not long to go now, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, or whatever it might be. And then you just looked at them through all the summer. They stayed up, the Grand Prix was held, and then they would come down again. And yeah, it was a pretty unique kind of, you didn't have much excitement in your life in those days.
But you know what? That was the first sign after the long winter break, wasn't it, that things were about to happen?
Yeah.
And I always remember when the hour changed on the clock in the springtime and you got the late evenings back. Two things happened. First of all, it was the Cowell Cup football matches, right? But it was freezing. But secondly, the scoreboards got brought back down from Homefield Road where they were stored. And I would be down on my push bike every night, looking and waiting, and there'd be nothing there. And my mum would say, "Are they there yet?" No. And then one night you go down and they'd be all across the road, because it was the old grandstand then, and they were all stacked on pallets and things. And I thought, yes. And then the next night you go down, and as Roy says, they'd have maybe dug out where the tarmac where the holes were, and they'd have orange cones on them, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
And then you go down maybe the next night, and then there'd be the RSJs would be in the uprights, and then you'd have the weekend, which I'd be just down there anyway, scratching around. And eventually, then there'd be some things would be bolted into place, some of the big panels, and eventually you could climb up on them and mess around with the clocks and stuff. But you knew you had 3 or 4 weeks till practice. So great excitement, and I wasn't any kiddie around there playing at it.
Brilliant.
Just a very interesting observation. You never stop learning, do you, about your chosen subject or whatever the case may be. But at the very start of this program, there was a photo popped up which showed what was a white tent, which would, if it was erected now, would be covering quite a substantial amount of graves on the back of the house, which has been there indefinitely. In fact, Jeff Cannell and the Wall of Remembrance would be pretty prominent where that tent is now. And I've not seen that before, but it explains something which we often talk about round the bins when they were warming the old single cylinders up, the G50s, the Nortons, the AJSs, and even before that, the Excelsiors, Rudgers, all the well-known makes. They had to fire them up first. And I've not been aware. My tent, in my mind, has always been down on where Park Ferme is now, which meant they would have to push them up and then push them flat along Glencrutchy Road to do the warming up round the bins. But there's many, many stories which said that I thought they pushed them up Greenfield Road up towards the filtration plant and then bump started them down there, because there's one prominent, Dickie Dale, I think, was talking about firing a bike up and all that. So you never stop learning, do you? And that's something that will be in my mind now to be passed on. We'll get through it some way. But it explains simply, you couldn't do it now, as I say, because that part of the cemetery is full. And not too far away either are some, some kind of headstones that we go to remember over the years. And certainly it's a bit of history of the TT that I didn't think those particular people in that area had been involved with the way that it's been shown tonight.
Brilliant. So, boys, we've had quite a few comments here. So let's, shall we say hello to some of the followers? We've got Del Jones from Shropshire saying hi. We've got Simon Heath, hi from Cheshire. Brian Spooner saying hello. Phil Nelm saying good evening. Glad to see you guys on again. Hi from Wales with Les Reese. Stephen Oates says, all right, cuz.
Yeah, Revelin Marshall, Stephen Oates.
Brilliant. And then we've got Lorraine Nelms also says good evening. Hello to Barry and Roy. And we also have Rudy Ryder. Hello, Rudy. Hello. Back in my motorsport days. Nice to see you on here. Brian Moore says hello to Uncle Roy and Barry from Silver Soil.
Silver Soil. There's a story behind that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it shareable on here?
Yeah, that's it. It's Brian, my nephew out in Germany, and he always refers it to the Silver Soil country because of the fact they finished second twice. I'll leave it for you to explain on that one. It's like the Olympic Games. We won gold twice. They won silver twice.
Love it. We've also got a sing-along dad who says, I was a scout on the scoreboards from the early 70s, and more recently, I've been working behind the boards as a scout leader, looking after the messengers. Great. There's so many incredible stories, aren't there? It's like we were saying just before we started the show, I think we have to dedicate a whole show to the scouts because of the impact that they've had on the scoreboard and how they've kept it going for so long. And Sean Hogg saying, evening, yeses, you two looking more like Isleman's answer to the two Ronnies by the week.
Well, we've already said that when we had a class.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay, boys. So we've got some great pictures, haven't we, to share, and some stories, more stories to tell as well. And it's always great to hear your personal link to it too. It gets us all geared up and just nostalgic, taking us back.
Remember years ago when you had the big Dunlop clock tower as well? That was another thing that used to go up, and the clock, and you can see that from miles around. You can see that from Williston School. When I went to school, it was that high. The loss of that detracted a little tiny bit. That was a magical thing. But that's some years that's gone now, isn't it?
The Dunlop clock.
Yeah.
There was one thing that somebody mentioned, and that's a thing as well. Even when we weren't maybe in the area, when the races started all those years ago, probably from that tent, the bikes pushed out, warmed up, all lined up on Glencrutchy Road. When the broadcast from the radio came on, it was bang on when the race had started. But if you were anywhere around Douglas, there was an organisation called the Rocket Brigade, and they positioned a fella up Greenfield Road. So as soon as they started to push the bikes forward, although they were on the clock for 11 o'clock start and away they went, you'd hear this massive bang over Douglas and probably a lot of other places on the island as well, because it was pretty prolific. And the number of times you've turned to somebody and said they've started just because you've heard that bang.
Yeah. Well, you can hear that on the old CDs, can't you? Or the sound stories, you can hear that. Yeah.
The Rocket Brigade, the races have started, and away you go. I spent a bit of time on the scoreboards from the Onken troop. I don't know what my official position was. I don't think I rose because there was numerous things. I mean, Kevin Quirk said that he'd started on the clocks, but he wasn't on the clocks. He was on the ripper off, which was a thing that you look at the scoreboards before the race started, and they go, everyone was on 6 or 7 or on one occasion 8 in 1957 when they did 8 laps. And he had them as the riders. He was looking down the road and then had to take the thing off to indicate to everybody what lap the rider was on. So I don't think I did that. I think I was up on the old Bakelite phones like Sean Hogg was, and one or two others who've been in touch with us. And it's part of an experience. But the thing I remember about it was just up the road on the left-hand side was a place called Homefield Villas. And that was the genuine children's home of the Isle of Man. And they got involved. I remember them coming to Onken to get involved. All of them, they were real characters. They were just being unfortunate circumstances, and they were put into a children's home. But they were great lads, and they all got involved on the scoreboard as well, even though they weren't scouts. And the biggest ambition of the fella that I was involved with was, got to get the chit, got to get the chit. I said, what do you mean get the chit? Got to get the chit. And then he'd disappear off, and he came back with a piece of paper. I remember in those days, in 2019, 2020, you can't walk across the road now. But as soon as he got that chit, that was the indication that if he crossed the road, took somebody with him, he'd come back with all the packed lunches.
Oh, they are.
Yeah, in a big box, and then hand them out to the scouts. So that was his job, and he took great pride in that, getting the chit, getting across the road, getting all the packed lunches and back. Because bear in mind, it was pretty tough times for everybody, and to get something like that, it was like Christmas Day, even though you were doing a job of work. Whether it was in the early days cleaning somebody's number plate opposite the pits, or getting involved in. And again, people will have memories of turning a particular clock, because prior to 1959, you didn't know what number was going to win.
That's true, yeah.
So you could have been on number 110 or could have been on 78 like Bob Mack in 57. So you had to kind of draw a ballot for which ones you're on. In 2019, when it was held, you knew full well that the winner was going to come from the top 20. So that was the boards to be. And just remembering, before we get Barry back again, there was a lovely little story that came on about a couple of close finishes we've been involved with on radio commentary. And you don't think about it, do you? The Boy Scout who had consecutive numbers, and Barry will be able to tell you the numbers. There was Bill Swallow and Bob Heath circulating together, and who crossed the line would be the winner. And he was synchronizing the clocks exactly. Normally you're only in charge of one.
Right, yeah.
And then Neil Kent and Dan Sale was another one when they were coming down Glencrutchy Road, and Derek Bryan and Craig Atkinson. And they'd got the scouts were kind of ahead of the time, and were actually synchronizing the turn of the clock when they went through the specific points, which were Glen Helen, Ramsey, and the Bungalow.
Those scouts will never forget those moments.
It's priceless.
Yeah. Well, I maybe feel a little bit guilty then in the light of all this, that I never did this job. And because of what my granddad did, and my mum also ran a Williston Cub Pack, she founded that. I really should have been involved in all that, but because of it was a race day, I just didn't do that. And I spent all my time watching the races with my programming pen, which I always did. And I missed out on that side of it. But certainly I can remember being down there doing pits for other people, and you can see all the activity at close quarters. Funnily enough, I was thinking today, one of the things I did back in the 70s for 2 years was a 10-lap production race, which is a great idea, but it was one of the most boring experiences I ever had in my life, to be honest with you, watching this 10-lap race, 2 riders. And for one of those years, I think it was the first year, 1975, we watched it on the grandstand. That was a long day, that. And the most exciting thing that happened that day was trying to decide what colour the paper would be that the scouts would rip off for the next lap, if you know what I mean by that. Like, say, on lap 1, that's yellow. Lap 2 might be green. Lap 3 might be turquoise, wherever it was. And you were used to 6 laps, but we were saying, well, what's lap 7 going to be? What's lap 8 going to be? And that sort of made it all the more bearable, to be honest. But, yeah.
The other thing that you look at, there's so many people involved in that area. And we're talking Boy Scouts. But there was also the painters. In the early days, it was a firm called Tregellis, and there was some characters on there like as well. And again, there's been some lovely stories. They were painting what they received from the scouts who were runners up behind the grandstand, coming down, and they would do what they call a slate. And they would scribe on it what the time was, or whether it was a growing time or the speed of their fastest lap, and then put it through like a letterbox that was at the back of the grandstand. And then it was up to the scout then to then put it onto the corresponding number, and the indicator would tell them what lap they were on. And that's how people on the grandstand followed the race. There was none of this, oh, I'll dial into my mobile phone and see what's happening. And we mentioned today, across the road there in the old grandstand when Peter Neal started, he was up at the back of the timekeepers when the Manx radio first started out. And they could never find out why the BBC could never find out why the Manx radio got the times before them. There was a very, very simple answer to that. A fella called Albert Quinney was the chief timekeeper, or he was involved, a very good friend of Peter Neal. And before giving it to the BBC, he would just quietly hand it over to Manx radio and say, don't tell anybody where you got that from.
I remember him.
Yeah, and that was part and parcel of it.
Brilliant. So, boys, we've got a question for you. So we've got Mike Assels is asking about the scoreboard. Is it being destroyed or parts being saved for the museum? I do believe some are being saved for the museum. Is that right?
This is a question I can't answer. And more people know more about it than what I do. Up until now, I knew this was being demolished. I knew it had to be demolished because of the condition of it. But I personally didn't know. I don't know what is going to happen in the future. I hoped in my heart of hearts that there would be some form of a replica with maybe something technical involved in it. Now, whether that's going to happen, I don't know. So, Mike, I don't know, to be honest with you. I'm in the same boat as yourself.
The rumour, well, not rumour, it has been reported on the street that the Manx Museum are designating it's been talked about for ages. Like, I mean, Jeff Cannell, when he was MHK, pursued it and didn't get any far. But there is going to be, allegedly, a motorcycle museum, TT related, entirely down at the museum itself. And they're already underway preparing that. But what we were talking about before, I think the story goes is that they're going to take 1 to 20 off both sides of the south board and the north board, as they would be. They are involved in taking 1 to 20 and also the map of the course, possibly. So that would be then put on display down at the Manx Museum. There's been all kinds of different things that have been mentioned besides that. and I think it's 2022 that they propose to open that. But there will be scoreboards retained in some form of originality, like Trigger's brush. The wood will be different from 1911, but at the same time, they will be the scoreboards that you see now retained, and for them to be viewed in the way they are now, but in a different place.
But I suppose when they did used to dismantle them as well, it was more of a chance over the winter time. If any repairs needed to be done, they could be done regularly, repairs or painting or whatever. Because they've been in the same position for so long, that hasn't really happened. And the footbridge really has gone the same way. The footbridge from St Ninian, from the cemetery over into Nobles Park, that used to come down as well as the St Ninian's Bridge every winter time. But that's been up now for about, I would say, probably over 25 years. Now that also has deteriorated, and nobody really knows at the moment what the future of that's going to be, because there's been various issues between the DOI and the Douglas Corporation on that, some disagreements. So who's to say that hadn't been taken down and checked more regularly, because it didn't really get used in the winter time. You weren't allowed onto it as far as I'm concerned, but that wouldn't have been in better form as well.
So Mike Castles is also saying the history that's been written down on the slates over the years. You got things like, John McGuinness doing the 130-mile-an-hour lap, Michael Dunlop sub 17 minute. We've got Peter Hickman in 2018 as despite the decades, but that's the most current stuff, right? So it's, if those slates and that board could talk, the stories that it could tell would be phenomenal, wouldn't it?
Painters were pretty brisk in putting the stuff on as well. Like they didn't kind of spend too much time. Well, they didn't have too much time really to get that out as quick as possible for the information. And going back to the old days, across on the centre where the Duke of Edinburgh is just talking to Harold Daniel, I thought it was my Uncle Jack, but it looks very, very similar from the side. But it was in fact Harold Daniel, who was starting, I think, 14 on that occasion in that race. There was the press office, or the press boxes, the centre of the grandstand, and they relied entirely for getting their reports on what was happening on the scoreboards. So they didn't have much time at all to write it down. You remember the section you'll see in No Limit, and any footage you see of the old scoreboards was those cream like writing desks that they had there, and that was the press centre, and that's where everything that you read in the motorcycle, well, not motorcycle news, would be the TT special at night. That's where all that came from, and their eyes were constantly on the clocks, constantly on who was winning, who was second, third, and they didn't have anything else to go by, and the people didn't either, apart from the BBC broadcasting out. But then when you got somebody who started at number 2 and the leader was at 100 and whatever it might be, is possibility, and over the years, well, that's how it was. They were vital to everybody in and around that area. That was one that we put on before. That was the start of a race, and that's where somebody had spotted that they started in like boxes, lined up in boxes.
Well, they usually had like a box at the front, which I think was known as the Iron Square. That was what it was called, in inverted commas.
Yeah.
So, like, say this were all across here, they would call the rider forward to his square, because it wasn't necessarily 10-second intervals back then. It could have been 30 seconds. So there's a little bit more time to play with. Even to a lesser extent, that happened up the road, didn't it, years later, where they had the two squares like that. Then you had 3, 4, 5, and 6 across the road, and then they all went in, all part of the pomp and splendor of the start of a TT. Happened to that, I would prefer that personally to the current archway thing. That's just me, by the way.
Well, that's gone down as being an improvement, you see, isn't it?
Yes.
The atmosphere of looking at that is just terrific. Today, the riders, what they're doing, they're the same now. The bike is there. They're not. You, Barry, know there's one pushing on the front there, just pushing the bike up. And
don't forget as well, Roy, just out of shot on this particular photograph, but was the gleaming trophy was always on display, wasn't it?
Yeah,
You know,
in the
and
centre.
I found quite a few recently. You couldn't do it now. A, the weight of the thing, and but more importantly, the value of the TT trophies. But back in those days, when they were only maybe 20 or 30 years old, they were very much prominent on display for the grandstand crowds to look at.
Now, there's another point that you look at, and again, going back to No Limit with George Formby, that start line is kind of down in front of the south board. But the ones that I can remember where Harold Daniel was in the centre of the grandstand, where those trophies were on display. Now, I mean, it doesn't make any difference where you start because you're going to start and finish at the same point. But now the start has been moved back up opposite the house in the Borough Cemetery. And certainly, you know, when you complete your lap, where you start from and where you finish is exactly the same. But there must have been a reason for that to happen as well. And it might have been because they pitted on the outside or whatever the case may be.
We've got Sing Along a Dad has commented here. His best memory of working on the scoreboards is from the 70s when there were a few races which started Le Mans style. Wow. Yeah,
we put one on, I think, today. Yeah, that was what Barry was talking about, but he knows more about them because he was in that area, whereas we'd be somewhere else when it was the production races.
Your production races, so all the riders lined up alongside opposite their bikes, basically, and a mechanic or a helper held the bike. And then when the flag dropped or whatever, they ran across the road, got on the bike, kick-started, usually all the electric starts were coming in, and then got going as quickly as they could. You just prayed your bike would fire up. They weren't too bad by the 70s, but I mean, going back to the days of the Clubman's TT, where I think you started threes at one stage, or you got 3 kicks. If your bike didn't start after 3 kicks, you had to push to your pit. So talk about being demoralised as everybody else went on every hill or whatever, or whichever course you were on. But yeah, and I know that they said it was a bit of a gamble starting everyone together like that. It could be potential carnage, but the fast men went, and everybody, it tended to thin out quite quickly. It wasn't as terrifying as you probably thought it would be. But
the other one was when the Clips course came into being in 54, was it?
54.
Yeah, they had mass starts along the top section where they start now. And that was a field of 20, 25 riders, sidecars as well, 125 and 250s. And they push start, and I think there's a picture of that, all heading down to Parkfield Corner. And there's kind of memories on that as well. That was a regular viewing haunt for us, just on the approach to Parkfield, out of Park Avenue, across into the wreck, and then get on the outside of the course to watch it. And you never forget that the German BMWs had the chairs on the right-hand side. So Parkfield Corner in a pack of sidecars was difficult for the passenger to make sure that he didn't lean out and get taken out by somebody's front wheel. So always, I think without exception, the British riders with the chairs on the left with the passenger hanging over the back wheel were always first into Parkfield Corner. The BMWs snaffled them up on Ballinard Road. But Pip Harris was the starter, and it was more often than not that was him in first into Parkfield Corner. So you've had the production starts, you've had the single starts, you've had double starts, you've had that clubman start, which Barry mentions about. But every one that has taken place has gone past the scoreboards.
Saying about the production race, one of our old quiz questions when we used to have the quizzes in the pub to raise money for the helicopter fund or whatever. The great Bob Heath was lined up with his goggles down, ready to go. And just about 20 seconds before they dropped the flag, he looked like that. And his lens fell out of his goggles and broke on the ground. So how demoralising could that be at the start of a race?
Oh my God.
Talking about electric starts, I think in the confines of the history, I think it was Fred Stevens on a Honda who lined up to get kick-started away or get away off it and bump started, and he was the first one, I think. I probably will be ripped to bits tomorrow,
CB450.
Yeah, that started with an electric start. Fred Stevens.
I have heard that ride, to be honest.
Yeah, good rider.
Yeah.
Well, if Barry tells it, it must be true.
It rings a bell.
So we've got a couple of comments here, boys. We've got a couple of memories being shared. So Sing Along a Dad has said, as a scout working in the press area on the grandstand, we got to read the news when it came down the tube before even the press got to see it. Very privileged. Love that. And then BH says, hi folks, despite attending the TT and the Man's many times, I've only ever spectated once from the grandstand. Saturday Classic Races 2019. Observing the race progress on the scoreboard was fabulous. I totally agree. So boys, we've got you had some great shots shared on your page. I know you guys shared some great pictures as well, the scoreboard. So we had Dave Evans shared a great picture, and Roger Barnes, which we brought into the show this evening. So first of all, I believe we've got a picture from 1910, right? So this is St. John's, obviously. So it's what a stunning shot.
1910, yes. So there was no pomp and splendor back in them days, and no comfort either. All your the committee, the judges would have a table and chairs somewhere along here on the left hand side. 1910 was the year that a local farmer tried to stop the race, and he got his horse and cart on the circuit, on the start line, and refused to move. Have you ever heard that story? And as people were trying to plead with him, going to move, he was lashing out with his whip and all this, you know. So eventually the crowds took over, and they basically pushed the cart out of the way, and somebody actually managed to disconnect the horse from the cart. And the best bit I read was after a bit of dialogue, the gentleman actually agreed to marshal after all. Yeah. But I mean, look at the crowds there. You know, I mean, I suppose lots of them would be there because out on the rest of the course is just a bit too out on the sticks, wasn't it? Really, in those days, you get the train to St. John's O'Peel at that time.
That's fair comment.
Absolutely fantastic. We're pretty much, I would say, there's a bit of height on that photograph, isn't it, Roy?
It is, where they be from up on the roof of the Timble.
Yeah, or certainly upstairs, looking at one of the windows of the Timbled in pub, I would suggest. And so the very first race, they used a blackboard from the school across the road. That was like a makeshift scoreboard, but this is a lot more sophisticated than what they had then. So we're getting there. But like you can see, it's just the basics. The clocks didn't come in for several years after that.
Well, he's a bit casual there on the spectator safety. Interesting. We got to Ballacrane. It's probably well written, and maybe we're just repeating ourselves, but on the exit from Ballacrane, they'd put like a shaped board, like a wall of death, but it wasn't a wall of death as such. It was just that if anybody got a little bit wide, they could use the board to kind of get themselves back on track again. And there's some fabulous photographs of that that you can see.
Great idea in theory, but in reality, as soon as you throw a wheel at it, it was down. There was quite a lot of accidents there, but can you imagine doing that nowadays?
Yeah. The course ran from there just as it is now to Douglas Corner in Kirkmichael. And then instead of going right and going through Kirkmichael village, the boys swung a left, came in all the coast road, all the Devil's Elbow and into Peel, and up by the Chippy, up by Gales Fair, up past the police station, down to the end of Timwood Road and turned left, and then went back to St. John's. And they were doing something like 10 laps on that.
Did you do 5 and 5? I think they had a break in between or something like that. But reading recently about Rem Fowler, the first winner's account of that, what he had to go through, it was quite incredible. Twice he had to mend valves, 2 punctures. He had to ride through a fire and he on the track where a bike had crashed, and he didn't know where the exit was, and he thought, I'll just go through the flames, I'll either hit the wreckage and have a bad accident myself, or I'll get away with it. And he got away with it, you know. Different world. We're getting away from the scoreboards here, but You know.
Yes,
So this is another one shared by one of your followers on your Mountain Memories page. I think it's Mr. Roger Barnes, 1922. This is a great sketch as well, isn't it?
Did Roger put that on, or Dave Evans, Hailey?
Oh, I thought it was Roger. If I could be wrong, no, I could be wrong.
I think Roger put a picture on today of behind the scouts behind the scoreboards. I know Dave is a keen historian, because I noticed this photograph, and I would, well, it actually tells you what would have said myself. In 1922 was the first year of the new clocks, the new idea, and this is the proof that it was that year. But a simple mechanism, but it's lasted a century. You know, the whole simple thing. And many's the time we've been in the pits for other people, and people have said, "Oh, well, when the clock doesn't go round, you know, you're a bag of nerves." But with experience, because there's two sets of boards, you tend to keep an eye on the other one as well, and you can line up with your own number and see where the clock is. If they both haven't gone round, you know there's a problem. But sometimes one has gone round. Same with the lights. Sometimes the light doesn't come on, and many has been the story of inexperienced pit crew expecting their rider to come through, and they're looking religiously at the lamp by his number, and it doesn't come on. The next thing you turn around and the rider's standing there going frantic because they're too busy looking at the scoreboards. But with experience, obviously you're using your own times, and you're also keeping a beady eye on the other lamp a bit further down or further up, whatever the case may be. That's fantastic. That very, very interesting.
Very different positions. I would think it would be Balacrane, Sulby, and then Ramsey. But I don't know what the C would that be. Crunknamona for the last one.
I didn't even see it.
Yeah, just it's different.
Better eyes than me.
Yeah, well, I put my glasses on, so that's always good value, isn't it?
We've got Robert Bolton's commented here saying, one of mine and Marilyn's memories is the scout who brought a bucket along to stand on to reach the tear-offs.
Oh, man. I know Bob and Marilyn very well, yes.
So we've got some...
behind the scoreboards, there's a massive big team of helpers there who are not scouts. They're just scoreboard admin staff. There's loads of people involved.
All the timekeepers box and all that, they used to post the times as well. They didn't have anybody else to give it to them, and the scouts used to utilize that. They had a direct line, I think, across to the press centre, but all the times that were coming out of there, bits of paper. It seems hard to imagine in this day and age that you relied on a pen and a bit of paper, but that's the way it was, and it was for many years.
Well, sometimes if you went down the back of the scoreboards the week after, there was loads of them bits of paper lying in the cemetery that just got blew away by the wind, and they were that busy they couldn't do anything about it. I remember seeing all those things.
So, boys, we've got some more pictures here of the scouts, right? So just to honour them. So just to see a little bit of what goes on behind the scenes of the scoreboard. And they've been taking part in that and contributing for over 100 years, as we mentioned earlier. But they do earn a badge as well, don't they? So they earn a TT badge. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's I can't remember.
Badge.
I didn't have too many badges. I couldn't do knots, and I wasn't very good. That would be for time served, and it probably would be there's the one of the 1:02.5 going through 1 hour 2.5 seconds, wasn't it?
It probably
2, yeah. 1 hour 2.5 seconds going through, and you'll notice on the little thing there too, 15 to 25 were the numbers that they would be on. And I don't know whether they've got a radio TT. I think they were all given one time a radio TT. There was a lovely story emerged today about Joey Dunlop. I think it might have been his first win or his last win, and took the time and trouble to go over across the road and have his photograph taken with them. And I know for a fact that they did a private photograph as well down in a place called Man Autos, which was down in Lee Terrace, where he'd invited them down, even though he was mechanicking and getting the bikes ready. a group of scouts who'd probably been involved in his number when he had the win. And Beatty, I think, was the name.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah. And I have been promised a photograph of it by John Fenlon, but it hasn't materialized as yet. He showed me it, but I think Joey spent a lot of time over the road signing various bits and pieces and hats and everything like that, appreciating full well how they do it. And there again is another piece of equipment which will be going somewhere, but it must be from when the light comes on.
I never seen that in my life before. To be
And
honest.
how many times has Peter Neal said, and his light is on at Signpost Corner, which was the first one, all done from a little white box where the fellow was pressing it, and then he would pick it up at the grandstand. And I know from personal experience, and I'm sure Barry's mother would do as well, looking across the road, just wanting to see that light come on to say that he's got to Signpost. They had to move it back further to Crunknamona because as the speeds increased, just like the commentary, fair comment, they didn't have enough time to get the information going. And as Barry has said, the pit crews were relying on it. It's going to be different in the future, and probably the technology is going to play a big part in that. But let's hope that those lads there, you'll probably be about, what age would he be now, 30 or 40?
Well, we were saying last night, I put a photograph on from 1982 and them all lined up on the scoreboards, and they would be late 40s, probably 50 by now, because I know a couple of lads who were in that photograph. Just saying about Joey going over to spend some time with the Cubs and the Scouts, going back to the Stanley Woods days.
Yeah.
Stanley Woods, with the top man at the time, was a confectioner, a toffee maker. So he regularly would go across to the scoreboards before a race and give them all a toffee each. So, because he had a ready-made fan club, didn't he?
Yeah.
You know, Stanley Woods, he gives the toffees. But the top man at the time.
Another story about that. Stanley Woods, although he might have made that gesture to the Scouts, had his own private timing system. And in Park Avenue, the first house, was one of the rare houses in Douglas at the time that had a telephone. And he'd arranged that he would then have somebody out at the telephone box just before you go onto the Sulby Straight on the left-hand side, just past the halfway sign round the 37 3/4 world-famous mountain course. There's a red telephone box, and he had somebody positioned there. And they were doing timing. And when Stanley went past the scoreboards, he was not relying on them. He was relying on somebody sticking a board out from the end of Park Avenue and him picking up what the current position was. And when you look at the history of Stanley Woods, that fantastic last lap, just because he knew he had to kind of wring the neck of it to get it round.
When he beat Jimmy Guthrie.
Yeah. And I think he did it on a guzzi as well, didn't he? And yeah, fair comment.
Was that 35, was it?
Yeah, a bit before my time. I didn't arrive.
It was
1947.
It was one of the first cases of a rider using timed information to
do
outwit his rival, if you like.
Yeah.
Great. So we've got Adam Killip here, says the Scouts have been in discussions with the motorsport team recently, and although it's clear there won't be a scoreboard as we know it for 2021, we hope a new structure will be in place for 2022. It's not clear what the design will be, as this remains in progress. Fingers crossed that they're still going to be involved in some way. And we've got the Scouts get badges. They get TT and Manx Grand Prix badges that they wear on their neckers. Thank you for your comments, everyone. Really appreciate you getting involved in the chat. Feel free to share it with your friends. We are going to be on here for a little while longer. Roger Barnes says, my first day scoreboard drafted into team in Woodburn by Welsh Jeff, 12 p.m. sharp, first pint, then beer tent for beer tokens, and great day on the boards. And back to the beer tent with tokens as well. Great. Love it. Brilliant. So
there's also a prize, isn't there, every year for the best turned out pack? Am I right?
Troop, yeah.
And there's a name on that, which is the Harry Butterworth Trophy.
That's exactly the one that just came to my mind. Yeah. The Harry Butterworth.
Yeah.
And I think he was
there's a lot of prestige in that too, isn't
that. And that's presented prior to the race.
That's right, yeah.
And again, quite a number of the personalities. Connor Cummins has no hesitation as a Manxman and appreciating everything that they do with going over to do it. But I do believe that one or two who've been approached have just said, no, I don't want anything to do with that. You know, I'm getting ready to go out and race. Yeah, so
Harry Butterworth lived on Whitebridge Road just before you turn into Windermere.
Yeah, right on the corner.
And I went up one winter time. He had all the Manx Grand Prix stuff, all the beanie hats and T-shirts and things. And I wanted to buy some for Christmas presents. And I got sent up to his house. Hi, Harry Butterworth.
Great. So, boys, we've got Mr. Brendan Byrne who's going to join us in the studio this evening and share some of his memories of the scoreboard. So we're going to welcome him in. He's also provided some great shots, pictures from over the years. And so welcome Mr. Byrne into the studio.
Good evening. Hi, Hailey. Barry,
Hello,
Roy.
how are we?
Nice to see you.
So thank you for joining us this evening, Brendan. You've shared some great pictures of your time as control. So just explain exactly how long you've been involved.
So I joined the scoreboard team as a radio operator on the North Board in 1996 with Jeff North was the scoreboard controller then. I then basically stayed on the board, serving under different controllers, Pete Gray, Bernie Potter, Dickie Haddock. I was Dickie Haddock's deputy. And then in 2016, at the end of the senior Manx, I was approached and offered the controller's position because Dickie wanted to move on with his work as the treasurer for the 700. So, so my first race was TT 2017 as a controller.
Brilliant. Brilliant. You must have collected so many fantastic memories over the years. You shared some pictures with us. What's been the most special thing for you being a part of the team and part of the being in the position that you've been in? I mean, look at these memories. The infamous beer tent.
Well, yeah, that's Bernie Potter, second from the right, with his beer holder. There was a definite drinking culture, as you've alluded to earlier, with Jeff the Death dragging people onto the board.
I know,
but yes, there's a lot of stuff. Unfortunately, a lot of the people there in that photo have now left us.
Yeah.
I mean, it was. There was a large and vibrant scoreboard team, and unfortunately, over the years, it began to decline. They've got Bobby, Marilyn, Bernie, Pete Gray, Jeff North. There's a few characters there in the beer tent, which is strange. You never usually see them in the beer tent. But
the manner after that, though.
To be in the manager, right? But unfortunately, things began to decline manning wise. Unfortunately, like people start, getting ill and getting old. By the time I took over in 2017, we were down to 5 members. Myself, my deputy Chris Ward, and 3 operators. So the first thing I did was to start a recruitment campaign and basically going out onto social media, asking for volunteers. And now we're actually up to 13 team members. We have a number of team members that are actually based across. We've even got one girl who joined us last year from Germany, Gabriella Smith. So we've started to go from strength to strength now. There we are. There's the team. We've actually increased in size since that photo was taken. But We really do. We love what we do. It's important to us, and we do have a very good time doing it. Everybody really gives 100%. But as the stories, there's always things going on, especially in the old days with the old classic races. Working on the front of the board, and you'd see a bike going by, and you'd see something fall off it, and then you'd having to go running up and down the scoreboard, trying to shout across to find out which pit crew the rider belonged to, and then you basically have to drag them, get them up to the board, and point at something on the track and say, "Is that important?" And then you could see like all the mechanics all like shaking their heads. And then running off to try and contact the marshal because maybe a rider may need to be pulled in because his bike's in a dangerous condition. We've seen all sorts, like the amount of work that goes into the bikes when you go around the pits and you're watching them being prepped, and then you'll just see something they'll just fail on the line, as you alluded to earlier, when you got 3 kicks and the bike won't start. I've seen sidecars primary chain snapping, going off the line, and you're just thinking, oh my God, the amount of hours they've spent getting that right. And for a small pin to fail and the race is finished, it's absolutely heartbreaking for them.
So, Brendan, you've had a couple of comments here as well. We've got Robert Bolton said, "Less of the old, please, Brendan." And then we've got Sing Along Dad says, "The teamwork between the officials and the scouts on the boards was great. I've worked with Brendan a lot." Colin says, "Hello." And Robbie Sylvester says, "Fantastic. Good evening, Robbie. Fantastic wealth of knowledge you boys have. It's a real treat listening to you sharing it. Thank you." So, Brendan, moving forward, and it's breaking our hearts having to think and see the board come down, the scoreboards come down. How are you seeing the future for the scouts and for you guys?
Well, in the current state of the scoreboard, it is the metalwork is in a terrible condition. It is like Trigger's broom because basically all the woodwork's mostly marine ply, so it's just replaced. It's just the actual frame. It would be wonderful to see a section of it removed and placed into a museum. What replaces it? That's a very good question. Certainly, we're probably going to go down the line of an electronic board, maybe with say an electronic map of the course, similar to MotoGP and Formula One, where you have riders actually moving around, so you can actually see your riders. It does also, though, there's like a moral dilemma where if you've got bikes going around and you're riding, suddenly that bike stops on the course. It's a case of then, has he broken down? Is he making repairs? Or has something more serious happened? It's these things where you're thinking about, and especially, as you know, everyone in the pit, as soon as they see something like that, the rumour mill will start firing up with what's going on. So how they do it, it's going to be very interesting to see, I think. Hopefully, I think in December, they're supposed to be publishing the plans or some kind of plans for the board. Maybe with COVID, that may be delayed. I don't know. But it will be interesting to see what happens. I think at the moment, we are in a feeling that we're in limbo. I'm certain the scouts are in exactly the same position as us. And also the chief timekeeper and his team in the timing box. But I'm certain it'll come out in the wash, as they say.
Boys, do you have any questions for Brendan before we have to say our goodbyes to him?
What was the first year you actually did you do the job as a scout yourself, Brendan?
No. I was a Cub Scout for a very short period of time, and I was thrown out for punching my stick there.
Yeah. Oh, well, I never did anything violent like that.
hence a future in the Manchester Armed Forces for me. But 1996, I was actually on home leave, and my cousin who worked on the board asked me would I like to have a go, and I spoke to Jeff North, and I said, well, I was a radio operator in the Royal Air Force, so he gave me a radio and he threw me on the North board, and he just says, listen to the radio and shout out.
No, all those gentlemen you mentioned, Bernie Potter, Jeff North, Malcolm Openshaw, I forget the other gentleman's name with the handlebar moustache. Bannister.
Oh, that was Stan.
Stan Bannister.
Yes.
He was a college lecturer. I knew all them fellas, but it wasn't necessarily from doing the scoreboards. It's because he drank in the manor as well as working on the scoreboards. But I knew them all anyway, you know. And good, like you say, they're not all around now, unfortunately, but good characters. Always good for the yarn.
Well, I keep bumping into Jeff North. I bump into Pete Gray and Dickie Haddock, and like Marilyn and Bobby. Actually, Marilyn's my father-in-law's cousin, John Burden. So we always, when we see, we always have a good chat together.
Typical Isle of Man, then.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Very
Listen, Brendan, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you sending your photos in and sharing some of your memories too. I do believe that there's more to this that we need to share. So quite possibly you'll be getting another invite onto the show. So I hope you accept it again. So thank you for your time.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Yeah, take care. Thank you so much, Brendan.
Okay.
We've got a comment here from Carlos. He says it says everything about the TT and its history and following when we can have a whole show dedicated to the scoreboard, its operations and operators. Great show again. Thank you so much. All right, so we have our final guest joining us then, boys. We have Mr. Ian Anthony Huntley, who has been to 73 TTs. I believe he started coming to the TT in 1947, as you mentioned before, Roy. So without further ado, let's invite Mr. Huntley into the studio. Hello, Ian.
Hello there.
Welcome.
Hi.
Ian, all right, yourself?
Yeah, it's nice to see you all. Nice to see you all. I missed the TT and the Manx this year, so it's been after all these years, it's been such a gap in my life. It's been dreadful. Anyway, I started in 1947, and my dad was great. He showed me how it all started, the Isle of Man TT and everything else. And we spent the first year, we started off at Brandish for the junior, and then we went to Craigney Bar for the senior. That was great. We saw the racing. But the second year, 1948, you'll see a picture of me standing on the scoreboard. My dad decided to show me what the TT really meant. He said, we must have one race in the grandstand so you can see the racing. Now, in those days, it would be 7 laps, mainly taking 33 minutes on average, which meant we were out on the course or out at the racing as long as 4 hours. So it was quite an opportunity to be able to sit in a nice, comfortable seats in the scoreboard area in the grandstand and watch what was going on. Earlier, there was a sketch which showed the clock, and it just shows how it's changed. In those days, they had Balcrane, Sulby, Ramsey, Bungalow, and Craigney Bar, I believe. And then the light came on, and the magic thing was sitting there and waiting in anticipation for the lights to come on over the numbers. That was the part of the whole racing that everybody, waited for the lights to come on, and the news were on the way around again. So that's my story about 1948, my first contact with the scoreboard.
Fantastic shot, that, Ian. It's absolutely stunning.
Nowadays, when I go over, sorry?
See, we couldn't quite work out on the first clock where the sea was. We thought Cronknamona, but Craigney Bar you've quite rightly pointed out where it be, and that was one of the BBC broadcasting venues, wasn't it?
It was indeed, yes. Now we're down to, isn't it Glen Helen and somebody at Ramsey, I believe, does the commentating at Ramsey. But it's cut it down a lot. So the clock's going around like that now rather than going around very slowly. Nowadays, when I go over, I've started using computers in a big way, and I find them very useful. And it's got to be something technical to replace the scoreboard, in my opinion. I end up in Sulby Glen or the Crosby mainly, and I take over the table in the window with 2 computers and a lap and a Kindle, and I've got crowds around me watching me following the racing on the computers. I make it my point now to come home on Thursday of the TT, so I can be back home for the senior, which I follow on 2 computers at home and phones and everything else. And that's, it's like being there, but it's not quite the same as being there. That's how I work it. That's very good to be sitting there with a few glasses of wine coming through. That's my friends at Crosby helped very much in that regard.
Very, very good.
I'm very impressed with your technical acumen, and it's far better than mine. I wouldn't have
And
a clue
mine.
about all that.
And mine.
Well, as soon as I sat down, I worked in a motorcycle shop, and this guy came and set up a website for us. And I thought, bloody hell, that's easy money. And I actually sat down and taught myself HTML. So I've written websites. I do a website every year for the TT. And I've just obviously written a book about the TT and my experiences. And that's on the computer, on website now as well, on internet. So there you are.
So tell us a bit more about that book, Ian, because it's about your 73 years at the TT. So we just give people a brief idea, because we are going to have you on more to talk about this, but we just give them a little rundown of, it's about your memories, isn't it, over the 70 plus years that you got there?
It's what I've been doing at the TT. I've seen so many books about riders and this sort of thing, but I'm doing it from a spectator's point of view. For heaven's sake, I've seen so much in 70 plus years. I've been involved with race teams, Norton, Britain, big names I've worked with, and I've done quite a bit with the press office. Peter Neal used to say, if there's any questions, ask Ian, because I had such a good memory. It's dwindling a bit now, I'm afraid, but I'm definitely, I can remember so much about the TT. And I wrote it all into a book like this. I'm onto my third volume, as it were, and that's being worked on at the moment.
Brilliant.
But there you are. That's me, my father, and my cousin on the Manx 1947. And then you can see the motorbike parked there. That's how they came across. They didn't come over in the posh vans and things. They were stacked on the deck like that. Is actually a race bike on the deck. And I think it was a Norton. You can tell me, Barry, was it a Norton?
Difficult to see there. You seem to be blocking it out a bit. If you could just move a bit to the right, we might be able
Well, the bikes that I came over with were the international Nortons, the square tank Nortons. And it wasn't until the 50s that we got the featherbeds coming in. And my father was working with Norton at the time. And I had some very good experiences working as a signaller at Ramsey for them. And did a lot of work with Norton over there. Great.
Ian, you were a great help to several of the lady competitors at the TT over the years as well.
Oh, yes. Yeah, of course, yes. I got dragged in a few times. A close friend of Bill Smith used to say, can you help out? I've got a lady rider coming. You can look after, can't you? I used to get, I wouldn't say lumbered, but I enjoyed doing it, especially Margaret Lingen, who was a close friend. And I could speak a bit of German. And I used to beat the fellas off with sticks saying, You know, you can't go away. She's a rider, not a lady of ill repute. And we had some good times there. I followed her over to Assen and Belgium and places like that. Yeah, it was good.
It's a tough job, Ian, but someone had to do it, hey?
Good, Ian.
Yeah. Liz Skinner, I helped her and a group of girls to get into the Manx, actually, because they were banned from the Manx for many years.
Yes.
We got them on radio, on Manx radio, and they promoted heavily, and eventually they got the ride. So I was glad to be part of that. It was most interesting. Yeah, good.
They never allowed women to go to the Manx Grand Prix dinner at one time. It was a male-dominated occasion.
Strange that you fellas, I don't know.
Yeah.
So we've had a couple more comments here, guys. So just about, we've got Martin Campbell saying the TT and its history makes the whole event. Already we've seen the non-racing TT activities reduce, dulling future memories. So the scoreboard disappearing is another step in losing the TT magic. Restoration or planned replacement maintenance is necessary to maintain what's left. Agreed, right? So we've got Graham Clutterbuck saying, I've learned so much, great history lesson and great to see a picky of joy in the timekeeping team. And Gail Core says, great to see and hear from Ian Anthony Huntley, amazing stories. Ian, we're definitely going to be getting you back on. There's so much more to talk about with your 73 years coming to our great event.
Brandish Corner.
Is this, who's,
That was
is this
where
your
we
mum,
were.
Ian?
My first race was at Brandish. And we're just walking back up to the Cregney Bar because we used coaches to get from Douglas to Cregney Bar in those days.
Yes.
And we didn't have cars over, we didn't have motorbikes over. We did everything by coach. We used to come around the hotels in the morning, say, where do you want to go today? When do you want to go today? And we could fill a complete bus up with 2 hotels. We were in the Eagle, and next door was Santa Rosa. And we got together, and Eddie was the coach driver. I can remember that clearly. I haven't got a photograph of him, but we filled the bus every time, and we went on mystery tours, points on the course, and there was a way to do it. I think that was the way to do it.
Might have been my father who was driving at one time, Ian.
Well, I never know. I didn't know what his second name was, but I could describe him. He looked like Gary Hocking, right? That's you remember. He looked very similar to Gary Hocking.
Right.
Oh Lord, yes.
Cheers to you, Ian. Look at that. What's engraved on the front there? What have you got written on the?
It says, well, I've got one for 2011. I've got an eagle for my 50th, Simon. Can you get that? I've got an eagle for the 50th visit and a series of tankards for my 60th, 65th and 70th. Up to now.
And has anybody else been able to attain that, Ian? Has anybody else done 70 years that you know of?
Wow.
I've asked many a time, and people say, oh, yes, there's people in the Isle of Man, but that's cheating because I believe that they're residents. I've spent money to come over here, so I claim that I'm a number 1 spectator, right?
Yes, you deserve to claim it.
With that,
People got together and presented that for my 50th visit, which I prize very much. A gold eagle.
Great.
There we go.
Well, Ian, listen, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you coming on here, and we're going to see more of you, I am sure. We can't wait to share a little bit more of your book. But thank you for sharing your stories with the scoreboard and joining us in just creating more memories and honouring and celebrating this iconic scoreboard that we're going to have to say our goodbyes to. So thank you, Ian. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you.
see you, Ian.
Good night.
So, boys, we're going to have to round it up. It's a sad state of occasions, isn't it? Having to say our goodbyes to this stunning piece of structure that we've known for so long. So, any final thoughts or final comments?
Well, you were then So the day you were down, Roy, was
Yeah,
I had a look yesterday, but I couldn't really see a great lot. But it's blocked off at one end, but not the other end at the moment. But as the days and weeks go by, there will be less and less to look at, I suppose. But just at the minute, you can't see a great lot.
First thing that's happened really is a lot of electrical work behind there to operate like kind of 180 lights. It's a complicated system. So the north scoreboard, which is the first one that the riders would come into contact with when they start off, the north one, the one on the right-hand side, if you're looking from the grandstand, has had all the lights removed above it. So the lights have finally gone out at Cronknamona for them. A bit disappointing, really, because they're not all that old. They were replaced about 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And I always felt there was an opportunity missed there. That how much would you have bid for light number 3, Dewey Dunlop, when you counted the number of TT wins he had under number 3? I'd have bid for number 78, the first 100-mile-an-hour lap with Bob McIntyre, and you could go through the whole lot before they were just kind of dismantled and thrown away.
Every number would mean something to somebody,
yeah, but they were just abandoned and thrown away. So there's no significance in the ones that are there now because they are relatively new. Certainly the clocks will be another similar thing that would possibly, have some sentimental value, but they're not too decorative, really, are they? It would have to be a garage or somewhere where you had your clock.
Yeah, it needs to be mounted in something. If it's just lying on the table, it doesn't really need anything, sort of thing.
Yeah, so it's there. But we're hoping to post, as being a retired person, not a taxi driver. I haven't have to earn a living. The government send me some money each year. Well, they send me some money. He said, "What kind of job are you doing at the moment, Royce?" I said, "I'm retired." He said, "What's it like?" I said, "Well, the hours are good, but the money's crap." So we'll be up there taking photographs of as it happens, and there will be a few bits of heavy machinery brought in shortly, I would think, to lift things out. And we'll await progress with anticipation.
We got Stephen Oates commenting there. Finally, I'll have some for my man cave. Yeah, fair enough. Right, boys.
When it all does come down, it's only what we knew in the wintertime for many years as well. I know we're used to it being there now, but generally once the Manx Grand Prix was over, that's all you knew then until next May. And it'll be strange to see that again after all these years. I wouldn't say it'd be a happy thing to see, but it'll be probably bring its own memories back, Rod, won't it, really, of how it was in the winter years ago?
It will do, yeah. It'll be a disappointment for the students up at the college there, because they won't be able to have a quick drag behind the scoreboards without anybody seeing them when they're walking down the pavement now, or anything else that they did behind the scoreboards, which
we up there with the camera.
Yeah. I often wondered why Barry's parking up area is in that particular area. I always thought it was something to do with the grandstand, but maybe there's a few attractive ladies that are going past.
The magnetism and the history.
Brilliant. Robert Bolton saying the board for a new lap record was usually saved and given to the rider who broke the record. Great gift to be had. So, boys, thank you again for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure, and look forward 2 weeks' time. We'll be back again. Hey.
Yeah, we'll get something else to bore you with.
Never. Thank you, boys. It's been an absolute pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Right, good night.
Right, back to the grandstand.
So thank you to every single one of you that have commented, that have shared your questions. It's been absolutely fantastic to have you with us, celebrating and honouring our iconic Isle of Man TT scoreboard. We want to say some thanks to, we've had quite a few contributors to the content this evening. This show is all about building content for you, for our followers, for our fans, whatever you want to see more of, let us know. And we also getting you involved in more and building the content. So we've had contributions for the shots, video content, questions, etc. So the pictures from this evening's show We want to thank Brendan Byrne for attending, Ian Anthony Huntley, Steve McGuinness for providing pictures, and also Roger Barnes and Dave Evans for commenting on Roy and Barry's Mountain Memories page, and we pulled those pictures over. And anyone else that shared your pics with us, if we didn't quite fit them in this evening, we still appreciate your contribution, and please do let us know, guys, if there's something you want to see more of. We want to provide it for you, right? So get in touch. If you want to join us in the studio, you've got a story to share. Share your love and passion to your commitment to a revved up lifestyle. So I'm Hailey Coxon. This is the Revved Up and Relived live show for the Spirit of Motorsport TV. Thanks for riding with us.
Bing, 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 bing. You go,